There's more mischief, mayhem, and nefarious goings-on in the city of brotherly love than Billy Penn could have ever imagined. We've got it all here on the Twisted Philly podcast. True crime, haunted history, the coolest and creepiest places to visit. Welcome to Twisted Philly.
Hey Twisters, what up? Welcome back to another episode of Twisted Philly. I'm your host, Dina Marie. This episode is rather special. About a month ago, Haley Gray, the host of the Murder Road Trip podcast, and Jeremy Collins, host of Podcasts We Listen To, were out in Philadelphia for the weekend, and we decided to do a joint live show. The event was called Twisted Trip. The three of us met with about 30 folks from Philadelphia, Jersey, Delaware, and we had an awesome time. So this is the live show. I want to warn you, though, if you think I'm a little crazy and loud on regular episodes, apparently I get even louder during a live show, especially during the last story that I share in this episode. I think I've adjusted the volume so that it won't blow out your eardrums. But when I talk about the Swiss cheese fucker, just know you've been warned. Here's how the episode goes down. Jeremy spends about a half an hour doing a Q&A with me and Haley, and then Haley and I each tell two stories. Haley tells some true crime stories, I tell a local legend from suburban Philadelphia, and then a really twisted tale from Norristown, where we were during the night of the live show. I really want to thank Haley and Jeremy for coming together with me. It was so much fun, and I hope we get the chance to do it again. We also had a few special guests at the Twisted Trip live show. Huge thanks and what up to Rachel, the host of We're All a Little Mad Here, and Kim, the co-host of Harry Potter Revisited. I enjoy both of these shows so much, and it meant so much to Haley and Jeremy and I that they came out to support this event. I hope you'll check out their shows too. All right, guys, here's Twisted Trip.
I'm not local to Philadelphia, but I'm going to say welcome to Philly on behalf of all of these people who are local to Philadelphia. What have you had a chance to check out since you've been here?
Last night we went to the Punchline. We checked out like a really shady alley. There was a trash pile with a mattress, so...
Was there anybody in there?
No, not that I know of.
Sometimes people inhabit those.
I was nervous. Like, I really did think somebody was going to pop out. Then we went to Mac's Tavern, because I love It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And we went to Chestnut Hill for the Harry Potter Festival. But that's about it.
I think the Mutter is on the list for me for tomorrow.
Yes.
I interviewed you in August for my show, but Murder Road Trip hadn't launched by then. Now that you're 11 episodes in, how do you like being a solo host as opposed to being part of a duo? Because I know that there is a little bit of a difference between the two.
I like it a lot more. So for anybody that doesn't know, I used to do a show for about a year called Curiosity Kills, and it was a co-hosted like comedy-ish true crime podcast. Being by myself is nice because you just have yourself to rely on. But I like to have different podcast hosts, co-hosts, so that's really nice to bring other shows on so that listeners get a feel for other shows as well.
And that's not me bashing on your former co-host at all. I know there's a little bit of a difference between the two.
Yeah, I just use my friends for that now, so I'm sure they love it.
Have you learned any useful tips about life on the road that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, don't park in that shady alleyway. But
Welcome to Philly.
Yeah. Well, they were about to break into Kim's car, and what road tripping has taught me was that I did not make eye contact with them, And I just stared at my phone so they would not think that I identified them.
Have you ever run into any locals in these towns that you go to because you visit the sites of different murders and whatnot? Have you ever run into any locals in these towns that weren't happy about the attention that these places draw?
When I drove by where BTK used to live, so one of his victims was like his neighbor, and BTK's home is not there anymore. It's just a blank, vacant lot in the middle of all these houses. One of his victims' houses is still there, and they kind of were like, why is this lady driving really slowly through a neighborhood? They kind of gave me weird looks. I am going to Stoll Cemetery, which is one of the gates of hell, tomorrow, and I know that they do not like it at all.
One of the gates of hell?
Yeah, it's right by my house. I'm doing an episode with Mike from Pleasing Terrors.
Oh.
Yeah, so we're doing Stoll Cemetery, which was part of like Supernatural. That's why the main characters are from Lawrence. It's supposedly a gate to hell for the devil. So we're doing like a Halloween episode, but there's only like 20 people in this town, and the cemetery is like right off the highway, and the town is so small that the residents like will sit on their front porches and just watch you, and they don't.
You're their entertainment.
Yeah.
There's, Maria, you probably, and Kim, because of where you guys live, you've probably heard of the 7 Gates of Hell in York. Yeah. We've got actually 7 Gates of Hell here in Pennsylvania. You can only see one of them. And the legend is that you have to be there at night. It's in York County, certain time of night, looking in a certain direction, and then the rest of the 6 gates start to appear. I don't know, anybody want to take a road trip?
How many gates of hell are there?
There's 7, Jeremy. There's 7 distinct gates of hell. Didn't you? I just said 7.
Are there others elsewhere?
They're all over the country.
I guess you can just say something.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, I thought you meant in Pennsylvania.
I heard there's 7 in the country.
You know the show's called Twisted Philly, right?
You know, there are other parts of the country. What's been your favorite stop on the road trip so far?
I really liked talking about the New Zealand Bassett Road machine gun murders. I had Jess from Kiwi Crimes on. That one was really cool, probably because it was in a different country. And Jess grew up in the area, and so she was able to talk about it. But every one of them is special. Like for Carl Panzram, we actually went to the penitentiary, and we went to see his grave. Yeah, each one is special. I like, because sometimes I'll have a co-host that is from the area that we're talking about, and then they'll give their experience driving by the site. So I just think it's fun to talk, not fun, but it's interesting to talk about these crimes, but then to actually go there, it's just so surreal, I guess. I
always thought it would be cool to get an RV and outfit it for podcasting and cruise around the country talking about whatever you wanted, not necessarily just murder, but whatever might come up. In any group of podcast listeners, there's always somebody who's contemplating starting their own. And you've had one with a co-host, and now on your own. What advice would you give to people who are thinking about starting a podcast?
Just do it. I would reach out to another podcaster, honestly, because when we first started, we didn't really know any other. I mean, we knew podcasts, but not anybody we could contact. And having started the second podcast, it was so much easier. Like when I started the first show, there weren't tons of articles online. Like it was right before the huge boom hit. So there weren't really any articles. You have to set up an RSS feed. I could not find out how to do that. So like I taught myself code and tried to like code an RSS feed because there just wasn't anything. So had I known a podcaster, it would have been easier. So I would just say reach out to a podcaster. Everyone is so nice. Like it might seem intimidating, but there's enough listeners for content for everything. So I would just reach out and bounce your ideas off people.
That's probably the number one advice I hear, because I ask people that question all the time, and it's always just do it. Everybody has this idea like, what if it's not good enough, or it doesn't come out right, or I sound like an idiot like I'm doing right now. Everybody's got an idea. It's that medium that anybody can get involved with. Some people record in the bathroom in their underwear.
Speaking from experience.
Right.
People have this studio that they've decked out.
I record in my car, so yeah, I mean, you can really go from a car to a studio. I mean, everyone has that, and even some people you can record on your phone. I mean, you'd be surprised the audio, and you can get free software. I mean, I think everyone worries about how it's going to be. Like, even starting the second podcast, I was like, oh my God, does this sound stupid? Is anybody going to like this? But honestly, just put yourself out there, and then you can get feedback and you can work on that. I don't think anybody feels like 100% comfortable with the first episode, maybe even the first couple. It's a learning experience, and I think you just have to deep dive into it, and then it'll get easier. And you can always reach out to me. There you go. That's what I did.
I have to agree with the advice of just do it, because when I was thinking about starting my podcast, I reached out to Justin Evans of the Generation Y and the Peripheral podcasts, and that was his advice to me was, man, just do it. You know, don't worry about, is it going to make a certain number of downloads? Don't worry about, will people listen? If you have something that you feel passionate about and that you feel confident about, and that, I mean, it's something you really want to do, then what you need to do is just do it. And there will be listeners for that. I asked you this when we talked back in August, but the question that I always end my show on is, if you were stranded on a desert island, but you could have one bottle of booze, one book or movie, one podcast, and one person with you, how would you fill those spots?
Okay, the podcast wouldn't have got down. The alcohol, I would probably say, like, I love Captain Morgan, so I'll do that. What was the second one?
Which person would you bring?
My husband. I know that's so corny. We talked about this last time, but I just feel most comfortable with him, and so.
Most people say their spouse.
Well, we already live together, and so I know I wouldn't I wouldn't end up like trying to kill him on the island because he's annoying me. So
I had one woman say, I've been with my partner for 13 years, and I would not.
And then the third one was book or movie. Did you say we could do series? Siri thought I was talking to her. Oh my gosh, I should say Harry Potter, but my real favorite series is the Millennium series, which is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So I could read those. And then podcasts would be this comedy movie podcast called How Did This Get Made? It's my favorite. Yes, I love it so much. So, and they have a huge catalog, so I would never get old.
You are local here, so I have to ask you a potentially controversial question.
All right.
Where is the best place to get a Philly cheesesteak?
Pat's. Pat's. It used to be Geno's for me. I'll be honest with you. It used to be Geno's, and then a couple years ago, Geno's put up signs that say, speak English. And I thought that's probably one of the most ignorant things they could have done. You know, they're in a part of the city that, I mean, the whole history of South Philadelphia is based on immigrants. Yeah, do they make a good cheesesteak? They do, but there's no way in hell I'm going to give them my money. I mean, they put it on pens. They were giving these pens out with cheesesteaks. Pat's steaks are awesome. Now, my daughter has a very different perspective on cheesesteaks. She's a Jim's cheesesteak fan.
Right.
See? Right? It is controversial. I am not a fan of Jim's.
I was kind of expecting a little riot.
Chairs start throwing.
But for me, it's Pat's.
Steve's is good too. Yeah, Steve's.
What are these just guys starting? Like, where's Bob's? Oh my goodness.
You're known for putting a lot of emotion into your show. And when I interviewed you back in June for my show, we talked a lot about the Nancy Spungen episode. And since then, which of your episodes has touched you the most?
Since that episode, it would be the episode about Move.
That was a great episode.
Thank you. I mean, you guys, if you listened, you heard, I'm not saying that armoring their home with guns and automatic weapons and bunkers on the roof did them any favors with the city. That wasn't right. But the city could have done more before they got to the point where they dropped a bomb on a house and killed 13 people. It's probably the biggest research I've ever done, the most extensive research I've ever done. Yeah, you ask me about moving, I start getting choked up.
There it is.
He wants you to cry. But I mean, my voice choked up. He's trying to make me cry. He is. He's just trying to make me full on cry.
I was listening to your Patreon episode about the Congolier Mansion. I have to say, fuck you very much. You totally had me on that episode. I thought it was real. For a second, I thought it was payback for the Twisted Nola episode that we recorded for Twisted Philly.
Oh, where you had me believing there was a ghost Christmas tree in Charity Hospital in New Orleans, and it was bullshit. No, it wasn't payback for that. I was telling you earlier, so the episode he's talking about is a Patreon episode, and it's about a mansion in Pittsburgh called the Congelier Mansion. It has such a twisted, depraved history of murder and hauntings, multiple murders with different people, different families that lived in this house for generations. A wife murdered her husband and his mistress, who was their housekeeper. And then the next person that bought it was a doctor, and he wasn't really practicing medicine. He was decapitating women from Pittsburgh and trying to reanimate them like a Frankenstein in the 1920s. Somebody died in an explosion, and now there's nothing there. The house has been torn down, and it's just a lot. It's bullshit. None of that happened. I didn't make it up, but somebody did. And so there were these two people, and their names escape me right now, but they published a book in the 70s telling the stories about what happened at this house. There were legends before they published that book, and then as people in Pittsburgh started to really research and find out, okay, who lived here? There was a family that lived there, and their last name was Congelier. There was a gas explosion outside the house. Their youngest daughter, her name was Mary, was killed in that explosion, not because of the explosion, but because it blew out the windows, and a piece of glass went into her leg and severed a major artery. So she died of blood loss. But that was it. All the other weird, twisted, demonic, murderous stuff never happened.
It's a 25-minute episode, and you mentioned that in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, come on. We're going to tell people in the beginning?
I'm sitting there in the beginning going, wow, this is really interesting. And by the end, I'm going, wow, I feel like an idiot.
But I didn't even, when I first found this story, I didn't know that it was bullshit either. I'm like, this is crazy. How have I never heard of this before? Because it was seriously depraved. And it was probably the day I was getting ready to launch the episode. I was just doing some cleanup and double checking a couple things, and I found a blog where somebody was saying, this is crap, none of this happened. And at first I was like, well, it's a blog, it isn't necessarily a news source. And I'm like, can I really prove anything I found? So I started digging even more, and then I started finding reliable sources that said it was garbage. And I was like, well, shit, I'm going forward with it, and I'm going to suck everybody in just like I got sucked in, and then I'm going to pull the rug out from under them right at the end of the episode.
I'm into the seedy and the not as public histories of cities that I visit. So to me, your show is kind of the ultimate guided tour of Philly. Is there anything you'd like non-Philly listeners to know that they may not realize about your beloved Philly?
I think I would want, and I kind of want to toss this to the group, too. I mean, I would want people to know Philly and the surrounding areas. Philly's a great town. I mean, it still gets a little bit of a bad rap, but just like any city, there's neighborhoods that are tough. There's neighborhoods that are decent. The food is great. The people are great. There's so much history here. And I don't know, what would you guys say to people who aren't from Philly?
The theater.
The theater. The theater's fantastic.
Museums.
Great museums. And theater outside of Philly, too. I mean, the Media Theater. I love the Media Theater. I go there every Christmas. There's great regional theaters. People's Light and Theater off of Route 30 in Berwyn. Yep, Act 2 Playhouse. This place.
As a non-Philly resident, people have this idea of Philly as a tough place, and you don't mess with the people from Philly.
I want to know, Kim's car almost got broken into last night. Look, I mean, major city, has reputations like that. New York, D.C., Chicago, L.A. And it's the same thing anywhere. But don't let that deter you from coming to the birthplace of America, for God's sake. And let me know when you show up, and I'll give you a tour.
That's what everybody's been waiting for.
Us, we definitely care about you. 25% of all doctors in the country get trained in Philly.
Some of the best medical care in the country. And it started here. Jefferson Medical College, the College of Physicians of Philadelphia, Dr. Mutter, Dr. Physic. Medicine was born, surgery was born here. Get something wrong with you, you come to Philly. You go to Penn. You get something wrong with your kid, you go to CHOP.
Will you give me a tour?
Yes, I'll give you a tour. I'll show you where the hospitals are, too, in case anything bad happens.
You can give them your 1-900 number.
1-900? Oh, my God! Did you guys cut that, right? Shit, do they even have 900 numbers anymore?
Oh, yeah.
Really? With all the free porn on the internet? Like, who needs to call a 900 number? Maybe Jeremy does.
I asked Haley about if she had any advice for potential podcasters. Do you have any advice for potential podcasters?
The first thing you said is really the root of everything. Just do it. Don't wait for it to be perfect. I sat on Twisted Philly for a while because I was nervous. And, I started the show when I was 47 years old. And not that you have to be a certain age, but I felt like, what am I doing? This is something completely different from anything I've ever done. I got lucky with the RSS feed because a buddy of mine sent me an email that was a link. It said 27 steps to getting your podcast on iTunes. And I just step by step followed everything in that email. Meredith Smiling, it was Adam.
So you didn't learn code?
No, hell no. Shit. You seriously think I could code?
I could drag and drop, and that's about it.
It's just do it. I recorded sitting in front of my Surface that's sitting right here now in my basement. I didn't have a microphone. I was just speaking out loud into the built-in mic of the Surface. And yeah, the first half a dozen episodes, the audio isn't great. So what? Then I got a microphone, and then I got a better microphone. Then I started recording in my walk-in closet that's a 4x10 padded space, and I'm like, shit, my sound is good. Like this is really good. So you get better as you go. You get more confident. You learn more. You meet other podcasters, and they give you confidence, and they share their advice with you. There is an audience for everything. Some of the shows I listen to a podcast about Tudor England. I listen to so many movie podcasts. I listen to podcasts about so many different subject matters. There's an audience for everything. And don't chase downloads. That's the worst thing that you could do. And everybody falls victim to it. You look at iTunes and you see all these big names up at the top and you're like, I want to be there. You know what? Fuck that. Because I've got the best listeners of any show. They're so... Fuck you. No, but seriously, Maria, I cried when I met Maria outside. Maria is the first person other than a friend or family member who I knew listened to my show. And that was a huge, I can't look at Pricey, I'm going to start crying. That was a huge moment for me, to know somebody that didn't know me, that was listening just because they liked it, not because this is my best friend, so I'm going to listen to it, or it's my mom, so I'm going to listen to it. That's what happens in podcasting, is just you make these connections that you never thought you would ever experience, and it's just unbelievable.
I agree. Almost all of the closest friends I have are actually just, with my first show, we had a really tight-knit community, and it's I met Kim and Maria through there, and that's I have these extremely close friends now that my first show never made it big, but it did not matter. It was we had this community where you can rely on each other, and if you, like you said, if you chase downloads, you're never going to be happy because you're always going to want them to get bigger.
Okay, wrapping it up. The question I always end my show on, again, is if you were stranded on a desert island, but you could have one bottle of booze, one book or movie, and one podcast and one person with you, how would you fill those spots?
If I'm on a deserted island, I'm bringing alcohol. I may only drink it, once a month, but I'm bringing alcohol. So the drink, I'm going to switch from when you asked me this before, and I think it would be Veuve Clicquot instead, which is a champagne. It's my favorite champagne.
Emily from The Story Behind said Veuve Clicquot too.
She did. Yes, she did. And I drank it. I drank it before it became trendy. Like, there's a picture of me and one of my best friends. We were in Narlands, and I might have been 23. I don't know, 23, something like that. And we were sitting outside at a cafe, and it's just us and this little teeny iron table between us and this huge-ass bottle of Veuve Clicquot. And we drank that sucker. I was back in the days when I drank. But, so yeah, it would be Veuve Clicquot. Book is the same. It would be It, Stephen King. I'd take a book over a movie any day, as much as I love movies. The one person, so Belle, the first time Jeremy asked me this question, I said, of course I would want to take my daughter, although I know she would not want to go on a deserted island. So would you go, or do you want me to pick somebody else? Belle, you would still be my number one choice. I wouldn't last without you, kid.
And which podcast would you listen to?
Mine. I'm serious. I mean, if I sound like an asshole, then I sound like an asshole. But I like my own show. I do. If I'm not going to be here, at least give me something that makes me feel like I'm home. So, yeah, my show.
Does anybody have any questions?
How many other podcasts do you guys listen to? 'Cause, I mean, I know I listen to like 60 or 70 podcasts a week.
Wow.
That is a ton.
Gosh, I listen to podcasts almost all day. I'm not sure how many. Maybe like 20 to 30. But I do a lot of different types. I'll do comedy or history or true crime. So it just depends on what my mood is in.
Probably in the same number range, but it's more just I think it's the diversity of what I like to listen to. Sometimes at work I can listen, but a lot of time I can't. So it's my train commute is really where I listen most, and it's an hour each way. So it doesn't give me a lot of listening time. So I'll listen, when I'm cleaning the kitchen and that kind of stuff. And
Dina, Pricey wants to know what you have coming up next for Twisted Philly.
I'm doing 2 books on the show that are just written versions of the show. I've been transcribing my episodes because I don't fully script. I have really heavy notes, like you saw when we were out at the podcast festival. So I want to do book versions of the show. So one's going to be Murder and Mayhem, one's going to be History and Hauntings, and then also really trying to push the fiction novel, which you've read some of it because it's based on you and me, kid. I don't know, I guess, yeah, so I'll give you guys a preview of what it is. So I like to write horror. I have some horror short stories on Amazon. Twisted Philly, the concept was a book before it was a podcast. And it's about 2 podcasters who are telling crazy, twisted shit about Philadelphia. And one of the stories they tell is complete fiction that I made up, and it involves the child of a murderer that disappeared, and he comes back and is somehow connected to these 2 people. I haven't put it on Amazon. My short stories are on Amazon, but I want to see if I can get it published the old-fashioned way.
Haley, what's next for Murder Road Trip?
I think I'm just trying not to get in a car crash when I record. Honestly, because
Wait, is the car moving when you record?
No.
Oh shit! Because I've recorded with Haley for another show, and we did Skype, and it was awesome, and we could see each other, and you were in the car, but I seriously thought the car was like what you just said. I'm like, wait, it didn't look like it was moving.
No, and everyone's reaction is always, "Oh my God, you actually record in the car. We thought you were just kidding." And I was like, no, it's the only place that's even remotely quiet. Just because the show is so new, I'd say just to be able to keep making good content. The future is very far ahead for me with.
I want to make sure we have some time to get to some creepy stories.
Yes.
Thank you, Jeremy. So Haley and I each picked a couple of short, twisted, creepy, maybe murdery, weird stories to share. And neither one of us know what the other one's going to share. And part of the reason for that is she was telling me a story recently, and I thought it was crazy and flipped my shit. And we're like, yeah, let's not tell each other. Just see what our reactions are to it.
Okay, so the story we were talking about was the pizza bomber case from Erie, Pennsylvania. And it was, I had no idea. It's it should be extremely famous. Basically, the story is this lady, Marjorie Deal Armstrong, she created a bomb that looks like a handcuff, and she had a pizza delivery man wear the bomb and then go like try to rob this bank. He thought the bomb was fake, but it wasn't. And it was broadcast on live TV when it exploded. But the history of this woman is incredible. Like, a bunch of her past husbands died. We were talking about it, and she's just reading through the stuff. She's like, what the fuck? Like, on the phone. She's like, what? And so I was like, dang it. I wish that we would have planned this, because the story is just crazy convoluted. And so that's kind of where that...
The bomb went around his neck. It was like a handcuff that went around his neck. And then Haley says to me, it's online when it explodes if you want to see it. I'm like, I don't want to fucking see that. No, I don't want to see this guy's head explode.
I'm going to record myself watching it.
I can't watch it. I can't see that.
Yeah, that's just a very interesting case. And
I know, I can't wait for that episode. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I've got all the notes down, and it's a lot more than I thought it was going to be.
So do you want to go first? Do you want to tell a story first? You're our guest.
Sure.
Here in this.
So I have a really short one that I just felt like I had to do because it happened near my hometown. This made like really big news, and it's a lady called Lisa Montgomery, and she was from Melbourne, Kansas, which is like near Topeka, but the capital. But so she, just a little bit of a background on her. She was born in 1968, and she was like, this is important or else I wouldn't be saying it. She was raped repeatedly by her stepfather, so the amount of emotional trauma she went through is just incredible. And she became an alcoholic at 14, which, small town, maybe not so crazy, but and when her mom found out, instead of just like trying to help her help her daughter, she threatened her with a gun. I mean, she got married at 18, abusive husband, married again after that, abusive husband. And because she sustained so much abuse from these husbands, she actually had brain damage. And the brain damage she had was in the part of the brain that helps control aggression. And so that's going to come into play with what happens. So this happened in 2004. This lady I was 11 at the time, so I was pretty aware of what was going on in the news. And this lady joined a chat room, which didn't realize they were around back then, but they were, called Ratter Chatter. It was for rat terrier chat rooms, so you could like meet breeders and discuss buying dogs. Well, she met this lady named Bobby Stinnett, and she found out that this lady was pregnant, and Lisa also thought she was pregnant. She has a psychological disorder where she actually physically believes that she's pregnant, and she even shows the signs of being pregnant. So she thought she was pregnant. She meets this lady, Bobby, and they start corresponding, and they start talking to each other about being pregnant, sharing their experiences and things like that. They keep talking, and then they decide to meet so that Lisa can buy a rat terrier. And they met on December 16th, 2004 in Missouri. And once she arrived there, the details aren't very clear, but when she arrived there, she actually strangled Bobby, the pregnant lady, and she cut the baby from her womb. And then she went back home and she pretended the baby was hers. So then, an hour after this happened, Bobby's mother came home and found her daughter, and her daughter, Bobby was still alive. They called 911, and she said that it looked like her daughter's stomach exploded. That's what it looked like.
Jeez.
And so then the paramedics arrived. They tried to save her, but they couldn't, and she died at the hospital. But the next day, they figured out who the murderer was, and this is where, I wanted to talk about. I grew up so close to this area. I remember them, talking about trying to find this lady and how she had cut, it was just, absolutely bananas because this town is so small, and you just don't hear about things like that at all. The baby survived, and her name was Victoria, and they returned the baby to the father. So, first of all, to me, amazing that baby was able to survive. Mm-hmm. So Lisa was arrested. She was found guilty of murder, which is interesting due to her mental health. In the state of Kansas, we don't have the not guilty by reason of insanity plea, We're one of 4 states. My background is in psychology, and that's one of my like main focuses is that it's like, I don't want to get into it, but we're one of 4 states, and that's basically against your constitutional rights. And so she was actually given the death penalty. So she was sentenced to death in April of 2008, and she is in the Federal Medical Center in Carlswell, Fort Worth, Texas, which is where Marjorie Deal Armstrong was also. Kind of ties in. But that one's short. I just wanted to talk about it because I grew up and I just remember it being so crazy that the police were searching for this woman. And I think that's happened other places too.
I know there's Lifetime movies about that.
Yeah. There were like 2 books written about this case. I mean, just I didn't realize that more people, I mean, I just remember it from growing up, but yeah, people are you did? Yeah, it's crazy. But so if she ends up being executed, I think she'll be maybe like the 2nd or 3rd woman to be executed, and I don't know. It's a very low number of women that have actually been executed. But
I guess a transition or growth that I went through doing the show, and I wanted to ask you the same question, but with a background in psychology, and for Rachel too. You know, like when I was doing the episode about Sylvia Segrist and really learning about her mental health state, my perspective really started to change when I think about people that have committed crimes and murders being more open to the fact that, as despicable as that is, they're not in control. They don't have all of their faculties. She was suffering from brain damage, that the woman you just told us about.
Yeah, I think in other states she would have been found not guilty by reason of insanity just because she didn't. I mean, there's like 3 prongs, of course, to not guilty by reason of insanity, but I don't think she knew. And they had psychiatrists testify and everything, but in Kansas, it doesn't matter. You're guilty or you're not guilty. It doesn't matter if you have a mental illness or if you weren't in control of your emotions when it happened. And I often feel bad for some criminals, which is really terrible, but it's like you see these patterns of things that happen to them as children. And of course, not everybody that was raped by their stepfather becomes a killer, but it's like you just see this in her and just kind of feel bad. I like to look at the psychology and understand why. So in a lot of my episodes, I start at birth, and I actually spend most of the time on their childhood because I think it's really interesting to put those puzzle pieces together. Like, oh, so this happened, and that's why this is going to come up later. And I just think that's really fascinating. But some people are just monsters. There's no excuse.
Mine's a little bit later.
Sorry. I really contemplated.
No, that was good.
One I wanted to do had with like child murder, and I was like, probably reel it back in, Haley. I was like...
Well, I was trying to find some things that would get you like, what? You know, the way I was. I don't know that this one will, but I think the next one will.
Okay.
The next one's shorter. This one's a little bit longer. And with Halloween coming up, I wanted to go a little spooky for one of them.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if Meredith or Jeff, so who, or even Sharon, so anybody near Chadds Ford, who's heard of Causcart Road? Who's heard of Devil's Road?
I feel like I've heard.
Oh, Christina, you know where I'm going with this one. So join the discussion if you know anything. Causcart Road is in Chadds Ford. It's near Kennett Pike, but it's called Devil's Road. That's what the locals call it. And I didn't know about Devil's Road until a few years ago. I was at a party at a friend's house, and it's somebody that I've known since high school. I've known her husband since she met him when he was in college. So I've known these folks a really long time. And somehow this story never came up, even though they know I like really creepy haunted shit. I was at a party at their house, and almost everybody there had grown up with her husband. And they all went to Great Valley High School. I think that's the high school out in Chadds Ford. That's the school district. And so they started talking about Devil's Road. And I'm like, what? Devil's what? Where? What? It was actually really close to where they live. My girlfriend lives in Chadds Ford. And so instantly the wheels start turning, and I'm like, all right, could I get in the car, go find this place, check it out, take some pictures, and still come back and not miss too much of the party because I am horrible. A couple of legends surrounding Devil's Road, and one of them is there's this old mansion that's probably close to 200 years old, and the house is actually there. It's not a legend, but it's everything surrounding the house that's a legend. So supposedly, the rumor is this house was built by the DuPont family very early on when early generations of the DuPonts came to Pennsylvania. They don't claim any ownership of this. I haven't been able to find anything that would actually verify that they own this property, but local legend is that the property is owned by the DuPonts. They used the house off of Cathcart Road to hide when they had children that were disfigured or deformed. Some of the more unpleasant legends about the DuPont family is that there was some incest, and that these children that they were, I see Miles and I see other folks like, Miles, your eyes just got like, what? Yep. The legend is the family would use this house that was basically in the middle of nowhere, at least when it was first built, to hide the evidence of incest in the family. Gradually, as these children would die off, their spirits would then haunt the property and haunt the woods. There's also rumors that in the 70s there were satanic rituals done at this house, not necessarily connected to the DuPont family. And I don't know if you've heard of the DuPont
I have,
family.
yeah.
Okay. The house is completely run down. Nature has practically taken it over. Some of the windows in the house are in the shape of crosses, but they're upside down. It was like a rite of passage if you grew up in Chadds Ford and you were a teenager in the 80s and the early 90s to go to Devil's Road, to bring some of your buddies, to have a couple six-packs. I mean, who partied in the woods a little bit when you were young? They would party in the woods. Were you brave enough to stay on Devil's Road? And the problem, though, was eventually the parties got worse. And as things progressed into the 90s and into the early 2000s, it wasn't just teenagers trying to show that they're brave and they're in the haunted forest off of Cathcart on Devil's Road. Probably teenagers, but people would go there and they would light crosses on fire. They would carve symbols into the trees. You can see the numbers 666 painted on a lot of the trees, and whether that was done by the people that supposedly held satanic rituals there or not, nobody knows. The road is desolate. There aren't any properties around this old abandoned house, but to get to Cathcart, there's major roads and cross streets where people live, and they got sick and tired of this. They got sick and tired of all of these people trying to check out the Devil House and Devil's Road. So no trespassing signs went up. Didn't do shit. People still snuck in. And then eventually in the early 2000s, the police actually put barriers at either end of Cathcart Road. So you can no longer go down the road, but before the barriers went up, and there's also accounts online of people from Delaware, from southeastern Pennsylvania, from Chadds Ford. They would try to drive down Devil's Road to see the house, and they would be stopped by black SUVs. There's nobody in that house. That house is old, abandoned. There's a gatehouse at the edge of the property that's like, probably an oversized shed. It's old, but it's been maintained. And there's like a fleet of red trucks at this gatehouse, and then there's these black SUVs. What are they chasing everybody away from? Granted, the police put up barricades, but it's not police cars that were reported chasing people away. And it wasn't just like, get out. It was following, getting so close behind, people were afraid they were going to hit their bumper, being followed once they turned around from the blockade, being followed for, close to a half a mile. And so people were starting to fear whoever it is that's guarding this property. What's really strange are phenomena that occur in the woods. The trees for a good quarter of a mile on each side of this house along Cathcart Road, heading up to Kennett Pike, they're bent almost in half. And they haven't been hit. They haven't been struck by a car. They haven't been hit by lightning or had something impact them that would change their growth pattern. It's the row of trees along the whole stretch on about a quarter mile each side of this mansion that grow at an angle that bends away from the sun, which is not normal for trees and plants. They always, if you have a potted plant sitting in your window, you'll notice it'll start to lean. It's leaning in the direction of the sun. And it's not the whole trunk leans. It's like the trunk goes up and then it starts to bend, and it bends away from the house. And so, the legend is the evil that was done in this house between supposed satanic rituals in the 70s and the children that may or may not have been from the DuPonts that lost their life there on this property. The souls of all of these poor lost folks have just seeped into the ground, and the trees are trying to get away. Some of the trees have just become so gnarled over the years They've got giant knots that almost look like they're the shape of a skull. And there's a rumor, back in the early 80s, the skeleton of an infant was found in the base of one of the trees, not too far from the house. And so when you look at it, its roots have come up out of the ground, and it's naturally formed this hole, or almost like this little cave in the trunk of the tree. But I couldn't find anything. I checked Middletown police and other police departments in the area. No records whatsoever of an abandoned child or that the police actually found a skeleton. And you know how these things go, right? One person tells a story and then it gets embellished and it gets embellished again. There probably never was an infant skeleton. That's part of the legend. I don't know if I would want to go there or not. When I first heard the story, I thought, oh, I'd love to drive past that house. Now that I've done more research about it and found out all this other freaky shit, I don't think I would want to go on Causgard Road. I don't think I want to see the house. I don't want to see the upside-down cross windows. I don't want to see any of it. What I think could have contributed to some of the legends, though, is the satanic panic era of the 80s. You've got this weird house in the woods. Kids like to party there. They think they're cool. They're spray painting 666, and the next thing you know, everybody's drunk and they're telling weird stories, and now this huge legend is bloomed. So, yeah, that's the story of Devil's Road. So try not to have nightmares tonight.
So are there any, like, ghosts of the children that supposedly...
There's nothing been reported about ghosts. It's just all rumor and legend and speculation. That's where disfigured children that are the result of incest were shipped so that they wouldn't embarrass the family and that nobody would know about them.
The thing about the cars, though, that's like the creepiest part, is to be chased out of there.
Well, because if the shit's abandoned, to me it's not just you're trying to keep people out. Like, what are you keeping them away from?
Right.
And why is that gatehouse maintained? Unless it's just, hey, I own this plot of land, there's some creepy old house on it, I don't want people there. I mean, it could be something as simple as that. I like to think there's something else going on now.
Wow. So this one I have a lot more information. I think it's going to be like, what? When I see it. All right.
Lay it on me.
So this is the Richardson family murders from Canada. Have you heard about?
I don't think I have.
Okay.
Has anybody else heard of that? Richardson family murders from Canada?
All right. Prepare yourselves. So there was 12-year-old Jasmine was dating 23-year-old Jeremy in early 2006, and they met at a concert. And as one would expect, the parents were not okay with her dating a 23-year-old. They met at this concert, and they kept in contact through a few places like vampirefreaks.com and Nexopia. I don't really know. Maybe like
necrophilia?
like Nexopia. I'm not really sure what that is, but it's like a Canadian site. And no one knows what goes on up there. But Jeremy told everyone that he was a 300-year-old werewolf. He liked the taste of blood, and he also wore a vial of blood around his
Whose
neck.
blood was it? Was it her blood?
I don't know. It was his. It was his own? Okay. That's like really narcissistic.
Well, shit, I said I want my own podcast on a deserted island, so...
So I don't really know if Jeremy knew how old Jasmine was, because she was listed as 15 online, but still that's 23, 15. Like I said, her parents didn't like it, and so she was so mad at her parents. She's like, why won't you let me be with this man? Blah, blah, blah. So she wrote to Jeremy through one of their websites, and she said she had a plan that would solve their issue. They could end up together, that she could just kill her parents, and then she could go live with him, right? Super simple, you know. He wrote back and was like, I think we need a few more details, like, for this plan. And so they start planning it online, which is always really smart to just, like, leave just a track, you know, of what you're doing. The day before they decided to kill her family, they watched, quote, the best love story of all time. Can you guess what movie?
Natural Born Killers.
There you go. So they're watching that. They're
Are you serious? I was right.
Yeah. They're like, we're going to do this tomorrow. And so this happened in Medicine Hat, Alberta. So Jeremy entered the Richardson family home through the basement, because that's where the parents lived. Or, like, they stayed in the basement. He wore a mask and was carrying just, like, a large knife. And he stabbed Jasmine's mom 12 times. And then the dad came in and was like, what's going on here? And they got into a fight. Then he stabbed his dad or her dad 24 times. And like, I think 9 of them were like extremely deep in the back. And so then they met up together. So she wasn't there for the murder of her parents. They met up and they decided to bring themselves closer together. They would murder her 8-year-old brother. And they stabbed him 4 times. And then the boyfriend like slit his throat. So they did that to bring them closer together. Because I guess that bonds a family. I don't know. So when all of the family was killed, Jeremy's friend Casey, who was 19, she came and picked the couple up. They headed like 80 or so miles away. And the next day, a neighbor saw the bodies through a window, which also, why was this lady
looking in the window?
Because this is the basement, so she'd have to like really be looking.
Get down on her knees and...
The little kid, the little boy that was murdered, his friend came over, saw someone downstairs, and then went to his parents.
And got his mom.
And
Okay.
his mom came over and saw him and called her.
Okay.
Oh, my
So I tried to get a book about this and I couldn't get it. So I was just trying to go off like a bunch of different articles. But the police were called and they found Jacob in the bedroom and then the parents in the basement. And so they thought, because there was a sister missing, she was abducted. So they put out an Amber Alert for this 12-year-old girl, and they honestly believed that she had been abducted. They honestly believed this little girl, because obviously you wouldn't think a 12-year-old killed her parents. So they put out an Amber Alert, or I don't know, whatever they call it in Canada. And so it's like a foreign country. So the police ended up looking on the computer, and they found these online conversations. So
Well, yeah, because that shit never goes away.
yeah. And the website ended up posting these conversations online. And so people were able to read them. And then they were like, oh, yeah, that's not legal. So let's go ahead and take that down.
Oh, my God.
But so there's record of the conversations. But then they realized she hadn't been abducted. And so then they went and they found Jasmine and Jeremy like less than 100 miles away. And then after their arrest, the couple just kept talking to each other. And then they got engaged. So they were both charged with the murders, but fun fact about Canadian law, if you are 12 years or young, if you're 11 years or younger, you cannot be charged with a crime. If you're 12 or 13, you cannot be charged as an adult, and the maximum sentence for whatever you do is 10 years. And if you're 14 or older, you can be charged as an adult and you can get a sentence worthy of your crime. So because Jasmine was only 12, she was not charged as an adult, and so for the 3 counts of first-degree murder, she would only face a 10-year sentence, like, in total.
Did you find out, like, was there any history of issues between her and her parents, or it was just, she just went off after meeting this guy?
I just found that she was really mad that they wouldn't let her be with this 23-year-old man. She didn't understand. You can see pictures of her. Well, actually, they didn't use her name ever. Like, I only found her name in one article because she was underage. So they just kept saying the suspect. And if you look at pictures of her, though, she's like full black lipstick. I think I saw one picture. She had like her lip pierced. Might have been fake. But yeah, she went full goth. And he looked the same. And so, yeah, she only faced a 10-year sentence. She pled not guilty. And then she was found guilty of all 3 murders. And she was sentenced to the maximum 10 years. She would receive credit for the 18 months she had already served, but because it's Canada, it's not, they're much more lenient than we are. She would just spend 8.5 years, so the remaining 8.5 years of her sentence in a mental hospital, which one would expect. And then after that, she would only be on probation for 4 years, and then if she met the terms of her probation, her record will be expunged in 2020. But Jeremy didn't get off as easily. He confessed like multiple times to the police, but then pled not guilty, which is my favorite thing when they do that. It's like, you're so dumb. But he was found guilty of all 3 counts of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 3 life sentences to be served concurrently. But once again, because it's Canada, he's eligible for parole after serving 25 years. the getaway driver, Casey, she took a plea deal and she only was charged with like obstruction of justice, and she was sentenced to a year of house arrest. And Jasmine has been out of the hospital since 2016. People who have interviewed her said that she actually shows genuine remorse for her actions, which is going to help with her probation. Like I said, if she doesn't get in any trouble, she's completely expunged in 2020. Yeah. But can you imagine just being so mad at your parents that they won't let you date this man for understandable reasons, that you would murder them?
No, I cannot imagine that at all.
Like, your daughter could do that.
That's where she left.
I knew she was going to leave. She was not feeling well today, and she also knew that after the Q&A it was going to get darker. She doesn't like any of the dark stuff. Holy shit. Canada's weird, though. Like, there's so many things that are great about Canada, like their prime minister. But then you look at the Ken and Barbie killers, Homolka.
Oh, Carla Homolka.
Yeah, that bitch was just working at a school. Whether or not she should spend more than 25 years, she shouldn't be around. I mean, what she did to her own sister. She shouldn't be, like, I'm shaking. She shouldn't be around kids.
Yep.
Because people found out she was working at a daycare and the internet shit a brick. And
yeah, she was living in, like, the Caribbean. And they went and found her, and then she married her defense attorney's brother, which is super awesome. Her defense attorney, like, when they went into the house, the police didn't do a thorough enough search, and they videotaped themselves, like, raping and killing these women.
So folks that may not know who we're talking about, the Ken and Barbie killers of Canada, young, attractive, like typically 80s, they were raping, murdering, drugging other women. One of them was her 14-year-old sister, and she participated in that. And they filmed it, and the police didn't have access to the tapes, and so she cut a plea deal. He took the blame for everything because he's stupid.
They felt like, because they didn't see those videos, when they offered her the plea deal, they thought that, like, he was abusing her and, like, manipulating her, and because a woman would never do that to her sister.
And so, you can't go back and...
Well, here we would. We'd be like, if you lied to us.
Yeah. But up there, they didn't. And so she got the plea deal, and she had moderate sentence, out, married, whole 9 yards, and here she was just as active a participant.
Some psychiatrists actually believe that she was more the mastermind, but she had some issues, some psychological issues where she just felt the need to please. That's what her husband wanted. That's what her husband got.
That's where I struggle because, and I say this on the show, like I look at, especially juvenile lifers in Pennsylvania, I recognize this about myself. I can be very situational. Do I really consider this person's mental health, or am I being super judgmental, right? Somebody like Sylvia Segrist, she's the first victim in my eyes. This sick bitch, like, and is that fair of me? Why does Sylvia Segrist get my empathy and my openness to try to understand her mental health issues and somebody else doesn't? And I don't know. I guess it's an issue I have.
It is situational. Sometimes it's like, oh, you didn't really have a bad enough childhood to be a serial killer. I remember being mad at my parents, but, like, not mad enough to plan their murder.
Oh my God, like, I thought wouldn't even enter my head. Yeah, that was messed up. That was good, though.
I sent my options to Kim. I had a whole bunch, and she's like, you should talk about this one.
Well, I don't have a murder case, but I do have something very weird.
All right.
One of the articles I found about this case, the title of the article was The Swiss Cheese Fucker. And I'm sorry, that sounds horrible. But that was the title of the article. This takes place, this was just a couple years ago, this took place in Philadelphia, up in the Mayfair section of, you know who I'm talking about. And I wanted you to read something. You want to come here? I'm going to let you read this, and then I'll get into the stories. Read the big text. Start at the quote and end at the quote.
So mean.
You said I didn't have to warn you. You said you would do it.
I don't even like cheese.
I know you don't. That's why I thought it was so funny.
I started to compare girls to cheese due to their milky complexions. Girls are soft, smooth-feeling, and tend to like dairy products more.
All right. Is that scientifically proven?
That and typical advertising always uses a girl to advertise dairy products.
I don't know. I thought it was a laughing cow.
She's got earrings, though.
Oh, she's got earrings?
So cheese is what I started to use as a replacement for having sex with girls.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That is not much of a replacement.
I don't feel like you have to tell us more at all. We got it.
Well, but, so what I should do is turn my computer around and show you a picture.
No, you should not.
No, it's not bad. It's not bad. No, it's not. It's not bad. It's not bad.
Was he warming the cheese? What kind of cheese? Was it like...
I'll bring it up and you guys can come look at it in a couple minutes if you want. A couple of years ago. That's nacho cheese. So this happened in the Mayfair section of Philadelphia, which is in Northeast Philly near Pennypack Park and the Frankfurt Mall. And so it was about 4 years ago, January 2014. A woman contacted the police because a man pulled up in his car and his junk was out and he had a piece of Swiss cheese in his hand. And he asked her if she would use the cheese to pleasure him sexually.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
Can I interject? How small was his penis that it could fit into a Swiss cheese hole?
Well, no, that's not how it was used.
Oh, okay.
He would fold the cheese around his penis.
So he wasn't using the holes in the Swiss cheese? Okay, okay. I don't have any more questions then.
And so over a couple of days, all these women started contacting the police that they would be out, they'd be walking Pennypack Park, they'd be walking to the parking lot of the mall, and this crazy guy would pull up with his junk out and a piece of cheese, literally a piece of cheese in his hand. Another young woman called the police because she was chatting with somebody on OkCupid. Let me read this to you. So this was from his OkCupid profile, okay? You see, when I was young, and even now, I seem to be judged on my looks and not my personality. So finding women and starting relationships was harder for me than most men. Couple that with a very strong sex drive, and you get the picture.
This is a red flag.
Yeah, right? Right? So, wait, but he's totally honest, right? So you got to give him props for, like, the brutal honesty. So I developed this fetish to help me deal with my sexual urges. I found that women tend to like dairy products. I mean, I like cheese. And settled on cheese to represent a girl. Thus, I started having sex with cheese. He put that in his OkCupid profile, right? On his profile. And so he goes on. This girl, this 20-year-old girl, her name, I wrote down her name so I wouldn't forget it. Where's her name? Her name was Gabby Chest. She was 20 years old
Her
from
name's
Philadelphia.
almost like
right?
cheese.
Her name is Gabby, Gabby Chest? I don't know. So he goes on to talk about what he would do with the cheese and how he would find women that would actually be okay with this, but he felt it was really because they were paying him. So he says, like, straight up on his profile, I want to be upfront and honest with you. I do it myself, but I would prefer to have women do this for me. I'd really be interested in having a physical relationship. So after the OkCupid profile, Victor Fiorello, who writes for Philadelphia Magazine, talked to the girl who had the OkCupid profile, and the picture on OkCupid, he did like the Google image search and found the guy's Facebook profile. He's from Norristown, right? He's from Norristown. So he goes to his house. I don't know if I would have done that or not, right? So he goes to his house. This was like January 12th or 13th. So it was a couple of days after police started getting all of these reports and SVU detectives from Philadelphia started investigating. He goes to his house, knocks on the door. Chris Pagano. His name's Chris Pagano. He opens the door, and the reporter from Philadelphia Magazine, Victor Fiorello, he says, hey, Philadelphia police are getting these reports of somebody sexually harassing women, making a very specific request involving dairy products, and we believe it's you. And he says, no, I get that all the time. I get that all the time. People confuse me with somebody else. It's not me. And then within seconds of the reporter leaving his house, the Facebook profile is gone. So obviously it was him. Philadelphia Magazine starts investigating this guy. He was arrested in 2006 in Norristown for soliciting a prostitute and disorderly conduct. The disorderly conduct charge was, the sexual soliciting a prostitute was dropped because he pled guilty to disorderly conduct. He was arrested again in Norristown in 2009, again for soliciting a prostitute, and again for disorderly conduct. And what did the judge do right down the street at Montgomery County Courthouse? Drop the solicitation charge again, only charged him with disorderly conduct. So he has a pattern of sexual harassment. He has a pattern of exposing himself. And they kept letting him go on the charges that involved anything that at all that had anything to do with sex crimes. He got arrested a couple days afterwards. He was arrested on January 16th. Well, if we drive a little bit farther out where Maria and Kim are from, there's... Did you just say it wasn't very Gouda? That was awesome! That was so awesome. A few months later, June is his hearing. He pled guilty, and he got a plea agreement. He was charged with indecent exposure, stalking, open lewdness, and harassment. The only thing that he was charged with was harassment and indecent exposure, so they dropped it down. He got no jail time. He was given supervised probation with SVU, and he had to enroll in counseling at a hospital in Philadelphia that specializes in sexual addiction, sexual abuse, and sex crimes. So during the hearing, this is what he says during the hearing, and I'm going to read so I get it right. I do not like cheese, except for mozzarella. That is the one cheese I have never used on myself. And so, no, I don't eat the cheese after I'm done using it for pleasure. It is discarded. I'm always asked that question. And when he was picked up in 2009 for soliciting a prostitute, he had a brick of Swiss cheese with him and asked her if she would rub it on his junk. That is our local connection to where we all sit right now in Norristown. And I swear to God, one of the articles, the title was The Swiss Cheese Fucker. Oh my God. I have some pictures. They're not anything inappropriate. But, like, the women that he was propositioning, they were taking out their phones, like, as he was driving around Mayfair. They would take out their phone and take his picture sitting in the car, and then they would put an emoji over his junk. And they were posting it on Twitter and Facebook. Be on the lookout for this guy. And Mayfair Town Watch was posting description and photos. And so the community was very much working together to try to figure out who this man was. Maybe he was hoping they wouldn't catch him if he went far away from home.
I'm assuming he was not lactose intolerant.
Well, he didn't eat it, so.
There were at least a couple, logically, there were at least a couple women that were like, sure.
I said this in the Eddie Savitz episode. I may not personally find any interest in somebody's fetish, but if there are two legal consenting adults that are of sound mind, who am I to judge? If he likes cheese, he likes cheese. Just don't be driving around naked propositioning women. Like, make sure you find somebody who also is into the same sort of cheese shit that you're into, right? Like, don't be just showing up at the mall with your junk and some cheese. And he said he liked Swiss cheese because of the texture of the holes. Like, it's just wrong. It's just so wrong.
You know that the first time somebody reported that, the police thought it was a prank.
Right,
they had
of course.
So, would you rub cheese on it, guys?
Fuck no.
Okay. I've never felt more vanilla in my life. I have some questions for him. Where did he buy his cheese? And what was his budget per month? Because cheese is not cheap.
I know.
They should have gone up to Erie because that lady that set up the pizza bomb, when they arrested her, they searched her house and found 400 pounds of cheese.
What?
And 787 pounds of butter. And she did not refrigerate her cheese. Did you not see the list? Do you guys want to hear the list of food that was her? I'll just read.
Wait, did she run the pizza shop where he worked?
She was a hoarder.
Oh, you told me she was a hoarder, but I didn't know it was food.
They found 389 pounds of butter and 727 pounds of unrefrigerated cheese.
Oh my God, could you imagine the smell?
Just a few other fun things they found. 1,111 cans of tuna, 37 dozen eggs, 93 jars of honey.
Well, we have a lot of honey at my house.
231 cans of vegetables. And then the list just goes on, and my favorite was 9 pork chops. So it's really random. But she she had 2 refrigerators because she was a hoarder, and she would go to the surplus, like the government. She would go like 3 to 4 times a week, and she would just say like, "Oh, my neighbor asked me to come and get this," but she bought an extra refrigerator, and one of the refrigerators and the freezer was stacked full of moldy bread.
Oh.
Like, it's like the worst thing you could hoard. And they took out 4 tons of food from her house, and
Oh my God.
and there was almost $10,000 worth. But yeah, you're right. They should have asked her. That was very funny.
We're coming up on the end of our time, so I think we're done.
Yeah. Thank you so much for letting me.
Oh my God,
Come
thank
by.
you for doing this with me. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys had a good time. Sorry for the cheese fucker story. But I was trying to find something as crazy as the woman with the pizza bomb.
That was even better.
They really put a lot of cheese.
Yeah, right? So we'll end on cheese. Actually, we'll end on saying ciao for now, Twisters. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.